Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Employee Engagement series. This is the beginning of our series. We're starting with this series of 3, and today we're going to talk about why I am not a huge fan or believer in employee engagement surveys and what you can do instead. So if this is the first time you're joining in, my name is Dr. Danielle Lord. I'm the principal and founder of Archetype Learning Solutions. Really, my goal is to help you attract, train, and retain your top talent, because going to work should not be stressful and owning your own business should not be frustrating. So last time we were together, we talked a lot about what employee engagement is. Today, I want to talk about, again, why I'm not a huge fan of surveys. And you can find a little bit more about this in chapter 3 of my book, Engaging Your Employees. Chapter 3 is entitled Examining the Need for a Survey. So in this video, we're going to talk about really what it is that surveys do and don't do. And then we'll move into a little bit more into the depth and detail around what we can do to create meaningful relationships that matter. In the next video, we'll spend some time talking about 3 strategies that are going to be really simple and quick for you to implement. And then later on, we'll begin to dive more deeply into the remaining strategies. So our goals for this session are really to understand the limitations of the traditional employee engagement survey and recognize that while they might be a feel-good event strategy tactic that you've taken in the moment, it's not necessarily the driver of real engagement within your organizations. And then we're going to identify strategies that foster engagement, such as conversations, actionable feedback, etc. And that, again, will be more into the next video that we do, the 3rd one. If you have competencies within your organization, this means competencies of approachability, interpersonal savvy, and understanding others. If you don't have competencies within your organization and you want to know more about them, please check out my website. We do have some competency tools and measurement strategies available for you there. So we know from the previous video that employee engagement is really vital for organizational success. Your employees are the connection point between your mission and your customers. And they really are the things that are going to help you drive to your mission, which is your ultimate goal, but also your strategies and the goals that you have outlined for the year. Traditional surveys often hit the mark, and we're going to dive into the why behind that. So the problem with surveys is that they are typically very surface level. They don't give us really the in-depth data that we need, the dynamics that are creating the events that are driving engagement or a lack of engagement. And because they are just a snapshot in time, we're missing the broader picture overall of what's really important within your organization. And I always like to remind leaders that surveys are simply a snapshot in time. It's what employees are experiencing in the moment. Now, I have worked in enterprise level engagement activities, and I have heard employees say to me, I'm not ready to take the survey yet because I'm waiting for that event, that thing that's going to just put me in the right mood where I can feel good about giving all ones in the survey. At any given point in time, the dynamics within your organization are creating events and situations in which employees are waiting for potentially the right gotcha moment. One reason I'm not a huge fan, the other is a survey fatigue. We are constantly putting surveys out to our team members, and it really does drive fatigue. And I've also heard that people say, I'm just going to do all 3s just to get the survey done so that I can feel good that I took it and I gave my feedback. So we tend to see less honest responses. I was working with a client not that long ago who actually experienced that very same thing within their organization, where they had a question that they were repeatedly trying to move the needle on. The employees took care of that by giving all 5s 1 year so they'd stop harking on the issue. So again, real events that happen within organizations. There's an interesting survey that was done a couple of months ago. I actually blogged about this, where about 30% of the respondents were saying that the reason they didn't trust employee engagement surveys at a broader level was because there was a lack of action. And I, again, have seen this firsthand. By the time the survey gets to the team, you've probably had a lot of changes within the team, potentially. You've had different feelings, different emotions that have happened during that time frame as well. But by the time we get the results to the employees and the employees come up with an action plan, it might be in play for about 3 months before other priorities start to surface to the top. And all of a sudden, the employee engagement activities start to trickle down to the bottom, if you will. So we end up eroding trust and credibility by the fact that we don't take sustainable, actionable measures over time. We maybe have a 3 or 4 month window in which those things are occurring, any action plans that have been put in place. So here's the other challenge with surveys is that they are often lagging indicators. Those are measures of outcomes that have occurred after they have happened. So it's like looking in the rearview mirror to see where you're going. What we really want to be looking for are leading indicators, which are real-time actions or behaviors that are going to predict future results. So a survey is just one more way in which we are relying on lagging indicators to try and give us direction to a new strategic place or place on the roadmap. The result of all of this is that we have false sense of accomplishment, that we've done it, we put the check mark in the box, we've had our survey for this year, let's move on. So there's also at the enterprise level where I have worked implementing surveys, there's also a high cost of survey. So if you're working in a large organization, you're contracting with a survey provider who has lots of employees, lots of FTE, lots of team members on within their organization to help you implement that survey at the enterprise level. It's a very high cost, oftentimes in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on the provider that you've used and the number of employees that you have. So there's also a high FTE requirement. So when I was doing surveys, again, at the enterprise level, I was about 20 hours a week for the full year of managing the survey process. So typically our survey time would kick off in March, and we would have the March-April would be our kickoff series where we'd be contracting with the survey provider, identifying questions, lessons learned from the previous year. By the time we get into late spring, kind of May, June, we are doing an event called Mapping the Organization. And so we are looking at every employee within the organization, and we're connecting them directly to a supervisor and then creating that chain of command, if you will. That takes hours and hours. And anytime there's any movement within the organization, everything has to be remapped and revalidated with the manager or at the director level. So that takes months for that process to occur, depending again on the size of the organization. Communication would begin early midsummer, where we'd start communicating with everyone, letting them know that the survey was coming out and that their voice matters and they should participate in the survey. And the survey would open typically about the September timeframe, be open for about 6 weeks, close mid to late October-ish, and then the contractor or the survey provider would then be putting the results together and compiling a report that would come back to the organization. So that would generally happen about the November, December timeframe. January, February, we'd be working with the managers, sharing the results with them, helping them get team meetings kicked off so that they could begin to actively action plan with their teams. About the same time that we would be kicking off the survey again for the next year. So by the time the managers got to the team level with their results and their scores, I was already involved in another part of the process, which took me away or didn't allow me enough time to really begin to work with the managers. And so by the time you get into that 3-month period, about that time frame in which the survey action plan started to trickle down to the bottom, I was already very engaged with the mapping process and didn't necessarily have the commitment or the time to be out working with the managers to say, how's your action plan coming along? Are you continuing to do these things? So it's a year-long process in a larger organization to make sure that survey process really has merit and meaning. Now, again, that was a large organization. That was tens of thousands of employees at an enterprise level. So not every survey process is going to be this robust. You may be in a smaller organization, and these larger survey houses might not have an interest in contracting with you. So I was with one organization. I was not part of the survey team and this particular organization, but they had 1,500 employees, and the survey team had a heck of a time finding the survey provider to engage with them because it didn't have enough dollar amount attached to it. And so nobody was really interested. So for medium or mid-sized organizations, it can be very challenging to have the FTE to put together a really great survey process, but also to ensure that you can find a contractor who's going to be willing to work with you. Now, for smaller organizations, less than about 200, Gallup does have a short, what they call their Q12 survey, very reasonably priced, but it does have quite a few limits to it. You can't change the questions, and there's no way to map folks to the organization. So you get really just aggregated data that comes as a result of that. But that is an option for smaller organizations. So there are quite a few flaws in surveys overall. So there's oftentimes this fear of lack of anonymity. Employees fear repercussions. They tend, even with a third-party provider, employees oftentimes believe that the survey itself lacks the confidentiality or the anonymity to really make sure that managers are not going to come back to that employee. Again, this is something I've seen happen pretty regularly. The managers will get the results, they'll skim through them, and they'll say, oh, I know exactly who scored us in this particular way, or I know exactly who made this comment. So I think the idea that even with a third-party provider who is working under federal guidelines to protect that anonymity, there is that concern, and I think it's a very real concern when the results come back to the managers and the managers miss the message of the overall survey results, and they get very hyper-focused on who said what and who scored the survey results in a particular way. So I do think that's a very real concern. And please, whatever you do, not fall to the sense of putting out a survey monkey survey internally. I think that is definitely one of the ways and areas in which employees feel that they are definitely without that degree of anonymity or confidentiality. And I have seen that backfire on so many occasions. So I would really encourage you to not go that route of putting together an internal survey. Survey questions, even with good PhD level researchers and survey writers, I've seen some pretty poorly written questions. And if you've ever talked with me before, the one thing I'll say is, oh my gosh, it's another double-barreled question. And a survey writer should know that double-barreled questions are not the best way to measure anything. The double-barreled question is, I am satisfied and happy. And so which one is it? Are you satisfied or are you happy? Because I have no way of separating those two things out to measure if you're satisfied or you're happy. So that's an example of a double barrel question. And I've seen them on almost every survey that I've been a part of. One size fits all approach is oftentimes what happens with our surveys as well. So we don't get the diverse experience of teams or individuals. This is, again, a challenge with some of the smaller surveys where they don't have that mapping capability. And ultimately, surveys are really infrequent. A year or 2 years is just not enough time to measure the issues and opportunities that are important as they come up with employees. We're seeing this in organizations across the nation where they're saying the organization's been flattened to the point where I have no one to go to. My manager's overworked, so we're not having one-to-one meetings. I don't see my managers, so I have no opportunity to give them any feedback, ask questions, get direction. So the survey becomes the only vehicle in which to do that. So that can be pretty frustrating as well. And so ultimately, what we have is a false sense of progress when we use an employee engagement survey, annual or biannual survey, not a biannual, every 2 years, in order to capture that data, when really what we need is real-time opportunities that develop or that we have through relationships. And we are really seeing nationwide a lack of relationships within our organizations. So we end up with complacency. Managers believe they're measuring progress, and we have disconnect where employees are just not getting the sense that they're feeling heard at all. We've been saying, make your voice count for 30 years, and really nothing's happened. So the cost, of course, is misconnections. The survey just cannot replace the genuine day-to-day human interactions that drive relationships, communication, and trust. And that's ultimately what all of us are wanting and experiencing right now, is a genuine relationship with the folks that we work with and the folks that we report to. Now, I think we're also seeing a real challenge with managers who are experiencing disengagement or a lack of engagement for the first time that Gallup at least has been measuring. And they're getting a sense of this as well. And so we are, again, lost opportunities all around, because if we have managers who are not feeling engaged, they're not able to take care of themselves. And if they're not able to take care of themselves, they're definitely not providing that care down to the level of the employee. Everyone is feeling that sense of disconnect. All right, so what really works is the frequent, meaningful, quality, everyday engagement, or everyday quality interactions with one another. Pulse surveys, those do work. They can be short, timely focused surveys, but they're not necessarily meant to replace ongoing engagement efforts. So there's different ways within your team that you can do a pulse survey or a pulse check-in without necessarily running a survey. So I'd love to have some further conversation about how we can make that an actionable item, so it's not necessarily a survey that's getting us to a point of survey fatigue. Action and follow through. This is, again, one of the real missed opportunities of engagement surveys within our organizations. Is we say we're going to do something, we do it for a couple of months, and then it just falls by the wayside. Again, as other priorities come to the top, the action items around the employee engagement survey tend to trickle down to the bottom. So we really want to be focusing on the personalized approach, the one-to-one connections, deepening and strengthening relationships. And then we don't need to be relying on the survey or spending an exorbitant amount of money and time on the survey cost and preparation. When do surveys matter? I think just because I'm not a fan of them doesn't mean I don't see the value in them. So I do see there are good opportunities to have surveys, and those would be if you're involved in a merger and an acquisition. So there's part of the due diligence process. If you have a new CEO or a leadership transition, might be a good opportunity to conduct a survey just to get a sense of where things are at. So the new CEO or leadership team knows what they're coming into. And any post-change initiatives. We have a lot of change within our organizations. I think there's probably some change fatigue as well as survey fatigue, but a good opportunity to get some feedback around what went well related to some change initiatives and activities as well. And that also helps to create a real learning environment if we're doing an after-action review, if you will, through some type of engagement related to those change initiatives. One thing I want to talk about that I didn't touch on in a previous slide is there was a note around the questions can sometimes be misleading. They can sometimes be confusing within surveys. I have absolutely seen this on multiple different occasions in multiple organizations. So if you have the opportunity to work with a survey provider, you can identify the questions that you want asked. And they make sense to us as the survey team who's writing them in the moment, but there's oftentimes a lack of understanding, a lack of connection when the survey goes out to the employees. So even with some solid definitions, those sometimes get overlooked, or they can just be confusing. So who's the supervisor, who's the manager, who's the leader? Those all tend to sometimes get lumped into one, where the intention of the question was really targeted towards your direct one-up reporting relationship, the manager of the department, or the executive leadership team. But we tend to see them all lumped in together. So we're not getting really good, accurate feedback. So the other thing that I've seen happen with the same type of questioning, or the unclear, uncertain questions, even with definitions, even with setting this up with the whole team, the team got together and they said, we really like our manager, but we're tired of the way the physicians are treating us in a particular unit within a hospital. So they took it upon themselves as a team to say that they were completely dissatisfied. And when we checked and talked with them and said, you have a really beloved manager, why are the survey results so bad? So it wasn't necessarily about our manager. It's because we don't like the physicians. Again, a great example of really not getting the data that you need and understanding what the true reality or the true picture is. I just wanted to share that experience because I've seen it happen. You do enough surveys, you can see all kinds of crazy things happen. So engagement is built through relationships, not data points. I think that is really the key of the message here. They're a great starting point. Again, if you're doing some due diligence, if you're in a leadership transition, it can be a really good place to get an understanding of what's happening within the organization, but I just don't see them as being viable long-term solutions. So for real results, we just really want to focus again on those quality daily interactions. How do we make connections with one another through relationships, through trust, and improved communication? So if you're ready for more, which I hope you might be interested in, discover the practical strategies in our book, Engaging Your Employees. We do have 12 strategies that are very simple and they are completely free. Every single strategy is very free. And so I have now taken from the book and developed a full toolkit. And so you can access that toolkit again on my website, but it takes the 12 strategies that are talked about in the book and expands them with a variety of different support resources for managers, particularly important if these are things that are very new to you and you've never done them before. And then I also, if you are a user of the Gallup Q12 survey, the short survey that I mentioned earlier, I have mapped all 12 strategies to the 12 questions that Gallup has in their short survey. And you can find a link to that document in the content that will be part of this video. With that, that's gonna do it for today. So why I am not a fan of surveys and what to do instead. I hope to see you back for the third video where we'll take a deeper dive into 3 of the 12 strategies that you can begin to implement right away. Again, these are all completely free strategies and they are far more impactful and meaningful than a survey itself. So thank you so much. Again, my name is Danielle Lord. I'm the principal of Archetype Learning Solutions, and we are all about creating a space where employees feel happy and want to come to work to support you and your customers. Thanks so much.